Hey folks, Chapter Mark here. One more time. This is Samuel chapters 2 and 3. I'm hoping to get 2 chapters. So the last section we talked about was chapter 1. We learned about Hannah and her thoughts and she was seeking God. And the second one that we learned about was, of course, the priest Eli, and then Hannah's son Samuel, who is the title of this book, which is 1 Samuel. And I want to get to David, but to understand David, you've got to understand, again, the key characters that are in his life, and these are key characters. I feel like I can't get to that story without discussing them. So let me talk about it for just a minute, because Hannah wanted a son so badly, and she promised God she would give him up. Now, this is interesting. I don't know if anybody out there has ever experienced not being able to have a child, but imagine not being able to have a child and telling God you wanted a child so badly that you then promise you will give him to God for the rest of his life. That's what Hannah did. So, and then she fulfilled that. And the thing is, so after she weaned him, and I don't know if he was 4 years old, 6 years old, 10 years old. I'm not really sure exactly how that was. But imagine then she brings him, as the family goes to worship up in Jerusalem, takes him to Eli and says, "Hey, do you remember me? The one who was praying for a son? Here he is." I imagine, I think she had to have thought for just a minute, "Hey, do you remember me? The one who said it was drunk while I was praying? Here's the fulfillment of my prayer." She didn't say that, so that we know of. So she said, "Here he is, and I'm giving him to you." I'd also like to see the look on Eli's face, because I'd be like, "What? I'm sorry. Excuse me." But regardless, she gives him, and she leaves him there at the temple to be raised at the temple by Eli, because she wanted to give her son to God for the rest of his life. Now, I can't imagine wanting something that bad and then being willing to give it up. Somebody once, very wise, said to me, and I think it was Matt Couch, in case he's happened to be watching, he said, "Always hold on to what God gives you with an open palm, because you never know when God may take it back." There was a home I once owned, and I said, "Lord, I don't want to give it. This house is the house you gave me." And I heard God in my prayer life say, "Who gave it to you?" And so we went on, we moved into the parsonage in Union Point is what we did. But so Eli became Samuel's spiritual father. His earthly father also, but he became his spiritual father. And as you go on in the story, you find out that Samuel grew in stature, meaning he grew, but also he grew in the Spirit of the Lord. So now Eli's sons were a different story. Eli's sons ate raw meat. They took it by force, and it was stuff that was given to them, but they decided to just take that. And it was they were doing bad things. They were seducing church women, and that may not sound bad when I say it that way. But let me say that pastors, counselors, psychologists, teachers were held to a higher standard. There's a reason they throw the book at somebody who takes liberties with people who are under their care. It's because we're supposed to nurture and treasure. We're supposed to know the difference. We're not supposed to corrupt somebody. It's taking advantage of somebody in the positions that we are in. So we're held to a much higher standard. And so these guys were saying, forget that. We're going to take what we want to take. And even Eli came and talked to them and said, guys, chill out, But he didn't remove them from power. He just talked to them, and I imagine I take it that they were pretty much saying, go on, old man. We're going to do what we want to do anyway. And so Eli kept being the priest. They kept being terrible priests. And but meanwhile, Samuel was growing, and he was starting to be known among men and as a godly person and a godly influence. So then one night, this is the neat part. Samuel's sleeping, and Samuel hears Samuel. So he gets up and he goes into Eli's room and he said, "You called?" And Eli said, "No, go back to bed." So this happens 2 more times. He said, "No, go back to bed." And finally, the 3rd time, it hits him. Nobody's heard from God in quite some time, which tells me what the land was probably like. And Samuel said, "This time when you go back, if you hear that voice again, say, 'Yes, Lord, your servant hears.'" So when Samuel did that, God gave him, God had already promised something to Eli because of the horrible things his son was doing. He promised him nobody would be old in his house and his sons were going to die. And God named them by name. And so at this point, he gives Samuel this same prophecy, word for word, and he says his sons are going to die, and he is going to die, and nobody in the house of Eli, as in his generations, is going to have a long life. So it was funny. He came back, and Eli said, tell me what God said. Tell me exactly what God said. Don't hold anything back, or I will pronounce a curse on you. And because I was thinking, if I were Samuel, I'd be going, well, God said he's not real happy with you, But so he was probably terrified. He told him the whole thing, and Eli had served the Lord a long time, and he said, God knows best. Whatever God said, that's what's going to happen. And we're not at the point that that's been fulfilled yet, but we know that it will. So Hannah kept her promise to God. Okay, Hannah promised to give her son to the Lord, and she did that. And promises are hard to keep. Samuel is keeping his promise to God as we go on in this story, and God is keeping his promise to Eli. He promised him, and I don't know what would have happened if Eli and his sons would have repented. I imagine we'd have a different story. But God fulfills his promise over the next few chapters. But you might be saying, how do I hear God's voice? I don't understand this. How do I hear God's voice? What does it mean to say God spoke to me? Because some people don't understand that. There's even a phrase, and I've heard Catholics say, you evangelicals talk directly to God. But God speaks to us through different ways. He speaks to us through prayer sometimes. Sometimes he speaks to us through the Bible as we read our Bible. Sometimes he speaks to us through church. I don't know if you've ever been in church and you're thinking, did Pastor follow me around all week? And sometimes God speaks through circumstances. But God speaks to us through different ways. But God speaks to us. God is always there. He's always present. When we seek a relationship with him, then he invites us into his work. And this is all taken straight from Experiencing God by Henry Blackaby and Claude, his name escapes me for the moment. But he invites us into his work with him. We hear him. He invites us into his work. God speaks to us. And then usually we have a crisis of belief. At some point, and somebody argued with me, but I don't think they understood what I meant. Because when God speaks to you and invites you to do something, there's going to be some kind of a crisis. Something will come up, Maybe God wants you to go this way and a better paying job is this way. Or maybe God wants you to do this, but it would be so much easier if you stayed right here. God's going to invite you, and there will be some sort of a crisis of belief, some sort of a crisis of faith where you have to choose which direction God is leading you. And then, because of that, you're going to have to adjust your life to what the crisis of belief was. And then after that, then you will experience God. And experiencing God is very different for everybody. Only Moses had a burning bush. Only Moses had a burning bush. Only Elijah got taken away in a chariot. I could say something for each and every prophet that is through the Old Testament and the things that happened to the ones in the New Testament, but the same things didn't happen to everybody. They experienced God in a new way. So I pray that you also know what it means to feel the fulfillment of God's promises and that you get to experience God in a new way. This is Chapter Mark. Love you.